Today we'll kind of introduce Google Apps. I think it does three things, right? I think it's going to help improve how kids learn. I think it's going to help improve how teachers teach. And most importantly, I think it's going to, in general, make the school more efficient and help the school operate a little bit better. It's kind of an offering where you can use as little or as much as you like. I'm going to give you an overview right now that talks about everything that we have, the benefits of those things, and then later on we're going to get into like how to use all this stuff. So there's some cool things. I actually started working with Google a long time ago, and I think about this all the time. Like, how did I find things before I Googled them? When I say a long time ago, Google's really like a 12-year-old company. This isn't, a company that's been around forever. But today, it kind of has a market cap bigger than GM and Ford combined. So this is a huge, impactful company. And what that made me really think about is how quickly technology changes, right? Recently, I left home for work and left my cell phone at home, and I felt kind of naked all day. I just felt exposed. And, again, it's really been the last couple of years that cell phones have become kind of, a pervasive part of society. You really need one in everyday life. When I look at classrooms, right, you can go around and look at schools anywhere. Brick and mortar schools, by and large, look like they did 100 years ago, right? 100 years ago, we kind of got into that industrial model delivery of instruction. Hi, good morning. And, we really are trying to give schools the tools to be a little bit more efficient, right? And quite frankly, when I think of kids and learning, no matter where they're going to go, they're going to need these devices. And so, we feel that we have not only a set of software, but also a set of these devices, whether that be tablets or Chromebooks, that are really cheap, really inexpensive, very easy to use, easy to manage, that allows schools to be able to afford this kind of stuff. So that's our goal, right? How do we enhance the delivery of instruction, and how do we put technology in place that enables kids to create with technology, right? I think it's a big difference. I recently was at a class. This is at the University of Pittsburgh, and I spent 3 weeks talking about programming, right? PHP programming. Now, granted, this is a technical class, but I took a picture because it was just funny to see all these kids that exist out there with these devices. And again, any profession that these kids that are in your schools are going to go into, technical skills are going to be required. So, there was a quote that talked about, I can't remember the guy, but, a lot of the jobs that you're preparing kids for today, they don't even exist, right? Things are moving so fast. So you'd ask, why isn't technology ubiquitous? Why doesn't every kid have a device? And the reality is, the technology that's been available to schools, which is really the Microsoft stack or the Apple stack, is so expensive. To actually not only just to, buy all that stuff, but to manage it. And again, these licensing fees kind of happen year after year, right? These companies, if in reality, I could sell you a piece of software. That software could work infinitely, but, kind of like the car companies, they want to plan that obsolescence because they would go out of business if they could only sell you something one time. Right? For schools, it's a little bit different than a business, right? Schools can't essentially increase their revenue, right? They can't become, higher tax rates. That just doesn't happen, whereas a business can kind of grow that. So it puts us in a little bit of a jam. Now, from a management standpoint, so full disclosure, I've worked in schools for the last 15, 20 years. I am the Chief Information Officer of Hempfield Area School District. I see day to day what you guys kind of go through. So I kind of play dual roles. And I'll just tell you, I've been through that whole buying of all the Microsoft stuff. I've had an enterprise agreement out at Microsoft, at Hempfield. We've spent $232,000 a year just to license all of our stuff. We have 13 buildings. So it was a no-brainer for us to kind of say, let's pull that back into our IT budget, right? And use a lot of this Google App tools that are free and, quite frankly, easier to manage, right? So like these Chromebook devices that exist out there, we put 2,000 in our high school last year. We give every kid a device. We've now gotten all of our curriculum to be digital, right? The actual curriculum cycles that you go through, those are really, really expensive. And so we found all of these great resources out there. And so, for us, it was about scalability. How do we scale that, right? And so these Chromebooks, literally we had a pickup day where the kids came and picked them up. We did not give the kids training because, they can use a web browser. It was that simple. And, from my perspective, I didn't have to update these. I didn't have to put antivirus on them. I didn't have to do anything, right? They update themselves. So, think about my life. I mean, Chris's life or Ross's life. You give kids actual PCs with an actual operating system. They need an antivirus on it, right? Every year they might need new policies on it. They might need to be updated. They get viruses. We got to remove those viruses. So, in terms of this kind of management of what I call PC technology, it's just very, very difficult. And we think there's an opportunity to be able to streamline that process. Gartner did a study. And it sounds crazy that if you do a one-to-one in schools that it could be $1,281 a year, but it really is, because it's not just the cost of the device. 2 to 3 times the cost of the device is actually what the real personnel cost is to manage this, right? This includes things like downtime and management, your IT staff's costs, and it just makes for a very difficult proposition when you think about having PCs inside schools. When we started with PCs, I'll go back that 20 years when I started working in schools. It was great, right? They are just that. They're personal computers, right? Today, technology's changed. It's all about collaboration. You can't really collaborate with these personal computers. But what happened over time is schools started looking like data centers, right? We got spam filters. We have mobile servers. We have content repositories, security systems, backup servers, email servers, right? And this stuff just proliferated. And it was really on guys like me that managed IT in schools to kind of pull all this stuff together. And I'll be honest, over the years, we've kind of band-aided things together just because we've had limited budgets. School boards never understand about spending money on IT. But what happens is once we buy some stuff, we have to fix it. We have to replace it. We have to update it. And so, we've had to have a real honest talk with our school board about having a stable IT budget so that we can have these levels of refreshes, and they weren't having that, right? So for us, moving to those Chromebooks were not only a necessity, but it was kind of the right fit for us. In '94, this was Microsoft Word, and I just feel that most schools out there, as of 3 years ago, were using these 20-year-old tools, right, for personal computers. This is Word in 2014 with the new updates. It does the same stuff, right? I can still do all of the same features. There really wasn't any incremental growth, but yet, at Hempfeld, we licensed that every year in an enterprise agreement, and we paid for it year after year, but we weren't getting that value. So it didn't make sense to us. When we think of using Outlook like you guys had, how many folks in here are actually, organized? I've always filed things away, right? I get an email in, I got a folder for that, right? And I do that because I want to find it later on. I'm going to tell you that doesn't scale over time, right? It just doesn't. There are times also when I get an email in, and it might be from Chris, so that could go into my Mount Lebanon folder. I could consider Chris a friend. That could go into my friend folder. So I have to actually make a decision, right? Do I put it, because that's how Outlook works. You can't put one email in 2 separate folders, right? So we've kind of solved some of that issue with Gmail, where you can label things, right? So I could put my friend label for Chris and my Mount Lebanon work label, and essentially that's going into 2 separate folders, right? It allows me to find things easier. The big thing that we've really dealt with at Google is search, right? So I've actually stopped foldering things. I still have some folders in there because it was just a habit. But, as of the last 2-3 years, I don't put anything in a folder. I just let it load up inside my inbox, and when I want to find something, I search it like I'm searching Google. And Google search will then go across all of your whole entire mail domain, and it'll search all your mails, it'll search all your instant messages, it'll search all your documents, it'll search calendar events, right? So this kind of idea of unified search inside your enterprise tools. The other thing that I think is a limitation of using Outlook, and why I think you guys made the switch, is there's quotas, right? My job, we spent at Hempfeld, it was $1 million on a storage system. That's just crazy, right? We spent $1 million to store our data. Now, granted, we have tons and tons of data. And so what we did is we started limiting people. We'd say, all right, you have a gig or 2 gigs worth of data. And so the teacher's thinking, all right, I got this mail-in from these parents. Do I delete it? Is that more important than the mail I got from a superintendent or another teacher? And I just think that's crazy, right? There should be no quotas. And so one of the things with Google Apps is now you have unlimited number of emails. I don't care if you have 2 million emails inside your email, it's going to be there. Same thing with documents, right? We've now went away from actually storing all of our documents on site at Hempfeld. We store them all on Google Drive, right? I still have as a district, legal ownership over those documents. I still have security and control. In fact, my security and control over those documents and the ability to audit it are much stronger than I even had when those existed inside my building. So it was a big deal for us to be able to kind of break those quotas out. I think it will be here too. And messaging, right? So messaging is really more than just email, right? I mean, we thought of messaging in the Microsoft world of, I have email, and I can send you an email, and we can respond to those emails. But in reality, once we put Google Apps inside HempFeld, we saw people chatting, we saw them instant messaging, we saw them video conferencing, we saw them multi-person video conferencing. I see teachers who'll say, I'm going to block these areas off on my calendar for Monday and Thursday, and they're from 5 to 7. And a kid could go sign up on their Google Calendar and get an office hour from that teacher. But the teacher would be in their home, and the student would be in their home, and they had this video platform. We can now manage 25 people in that video conference at the same time. We can also record that actual video conference and then store that inside YouTube. This has been hugely helpful for teachers to be able to interact with not only students and their families, but kind of remove the boundaries of the actual physical school. So it has been a big deal for us. Again, this is really all about collaboration. Personal computers are just that. They're for you. They're not really built for collaboration in that sense. Pre Google Apps inside HempFeld, let's say, we were applying for a grant, right? A Classroom for the Future grant, whatever it might be. It would require the tech director. It would require a principal. It might require a curriculum director. And so the way we'd do it is I'd create a Microsoft Word document, and then I'd put my stuff in there, and then I'd send that off to 4 people. So Jesse would get it, Sally would get it, Casey would get it. They would go and they'd make their changes, and then I'd have to be the gatekeeper, right? So all 3 of those are attaching it to an email, sending that whole document back to me, and I'm actually trying to pull all these things together. I'm tracking changes. It's a crazy process. And again, I get to this version 2, and I find out that Rachel actually never put her stuff in, right? And so I got to go through this whole thing again. This revision process is kind of a nuts process, right? So with Google Docs, it's been a godsend for us at HempFeld in particular, because I create a document, I could share it with everybody in the room, and as you're typing, I actually see character by character changes. I have a full revision history, so if there's something that you typed in that is wrong and I want to change that and edit it, I can actually go back and revert to those previous versions. So it does all the same things as your Microsoft Word does. In fact, you could send me a Microsoft Word document. I can open that up inside Google, I can edit it, and I can save it back as a Word document, and I can send it back to you. So now we have this kind of feature for feature fidelity between Google Apps and Microsoft Office. So it's really, it doesn't work that way the other way around, right? I mean, I can't be in Microsoft Word and take a Google document and edit it, change it, and have that actually take place. So we've kind of went to those levels to be able to have this open platform. So our approach is just a little bit different, right? So we want things to be simple. We want them to be powerful. Technology should be easy for schools. It should be easy to set up and maintain. For us, the focus is on students and learning goals and how to achieve those goals, right? We want to give teachers tools, right? We want to make things easy. We don't want to kind of bring you into these long trainings, right? Month after month after month, when you're not going to want to pay attention to this stuff. I think that in this short session today, I can give you all of the tools to be an expert inside this, because it's simple stuff. One of the things Google's done is it spent a lot of time on researching interface design. So think of it this way. There's probably 700 to 800 million people that have a Gmail account, right? Google never taught any one of those 700 or 800 million people how to use that. They spent money on interface design, kind of like there's a company in the Strip District called Maya Design, and all they do is they figure out ways to make things simple so they don't have to have huge, learning processes to master something. And that's what this is really all about. It's simple. And lastly, it's about engaging students. For us, one of the best things that we could have done out at HempFeld was give a kid a device. Not only did that impact mom and dad, and they saw that happening and something coming home to the kid, but we're engaging those kids. I mean, even something as simple as being able to, they hear something in class, maybe they're too embarrassed to ask the teacher what that's about. I see a kid just Googling away and finding what those answers are. And it's just, again, it's providing these tools that they're going to need when they get to college or they're getting into their job. We just felt this is an easy way to do that inside our schools. And quite frankly, I didn't increase my IT budget out there. My IT budget has remained flat. I just shifted the way I spent my dollars, okay? So it's about, our approach is using the browser as a universal desktop, using the internet actually as a tool to do computing, right? So all of your apps, all of your data via the browser on any device. So these are the core suite of tools that we've now recently deployed in conjunction with Ross and Chris. You'll have Gmail, right? This is going to be no quotas, unlimited, as much as you can have. And again, integrated with that Gmail is going to be your instant messaging, right? So you have real-time instant messaging. There's also a presence feature around it, right? So you can indicate, tied into your calendar, whether you're available or not, right? So if your calendar is busy, we're going to then be able to have indicators that say, I'm not available at this time. You also have video conferencing built out of that. There's another thing that you'll get is an actual phone number, right? So I'll show you in a little bit. I actually have a Google Voice phone number. And the reason I use that phone number is manyfold, but the first one is I can actually give someone my Google Voice number, and I can change my cell phone as many times as I want. My Google Voice number always stays the same, and I link that with whatever cell phone I'm using, right? When you call me on that Google Voice number, it's going to first ring my cell phone. If I don't answer my cell phone, it's going to ring my office phone. If I don't answer my office phone, it's going to ring my home phone. It's the number that's kind of everywhere, okay? We'll show you that in a little bit. So, again, it's more than just email. Messaging is this kind of multiple strategy of like voice, video, and presence. Okay, calendar. This is going to work like your Outlook calendars, but it's going to be shareable. You're going to be able to look into each other's calendars to see when you're free or you're busy. You're going to be able to schedule things like resources, like this room in particular. This actually has a calendar now, right? And you're going to be able to make those requests to be able to grab that. Groups is something that I think you'll find powerful in terms of how to work with your students, right? So instead of, if I want to send an email out to all the kids in my class, I'm not going to go and put 25 emails inside an email address. I'm going to create a group one time. And then from that point forward, I'm going to type in first period English. And that's going to put all the kids' email addresses in that message. Or if I'm sharing something, I can use that same exact group. And it makes things much easier in terms of how to share stuff. Google Sites, you may want to use this for project sites, right? There may be classroom sites. I see schools that actually use it for full portal and replacing school wires and things like that. I will tell you this, in about 2 months, Google Sites going to be re-released. It's actually going to be an enterprise-grade product for content management systems. I'm using it now. It's an amazing tool. And at Hempfeld, we're going to get rid of our $17,000 a year school wires account that manages our website there. So that's a huge savings for us. Google Drive, again, this is two things, right? It's storing things, right? And it's also these productivity tools, right? So these are your replacements for Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and drawings. So we have all of our own versions. They work on any device. When you bought a computer before, you'd put Word, PowerPoint, Excel, so forth, Office on that computer. And if I had 3 or 4 computers, I'm actually buying a license for each one of those computers, right? This is the idea of an actual Office productivity suite that works on any device, right? You're not paying anything for that. Google Classroom, again, I hesitate to call it a learning management system, right? I don't think learning management systems, in my opinion, have been used in brick and mortar schools all that much. I think the penetration is very, very small because you're actually with these kids. This is a really cool tool that you can actually push out homework to kids. Kids can actually do the homework, right? It actually creates a little button inside their Google Docs. It might be a Word doc that you created. It's the Google version, right? A Google Doc. And the button will have a turn-in button. So they can create go ahead and do their homework. They click the turn-in button. It's going to come back to you, and you're going to then be able to grade that, right? So there's a lot of really cool tools inside Classroom. It essentially works with your Google Drive, right? All of those various tools that are in there, you can build assignments on them, and then you can distribute those, and you can get that back from kids. And the next one's Hangouts. I should have updated that because
Jordan,
yes,
if you don't mind for that.
please.
What did you say? Could you go over Vault again? What's Vault?
So Google Vault, every school has to have some level of compliance and e-discovery, right? So let's just say Mr. Zappala decides he wants to subpoena the school, right? Something happened. Someone's under investigation, right? The school has a responsibility to respond with that. Or you get an open record request, right? Sunshine Law. And they say, I want all of the emails of, Mr. Chris. And, the district has to turn those over. That's the law, okay? Normally what we did in the past is, Ross or Chris would then go through and they'd go through Exchange and they'd pull all of those emails, right, hoping they could find all of those guys, right? And they'd build this file and then they'd turn that over based on that subpoena, okay? This, I could actually go ahead and create an account for Mr. Zappala, and I could say, you're able to look at the emails of this person and get the district out of the e-discovery process, okay? So that's what Google Vault is. Google Vault, as of a year ago, was $50 per user, okay? We now give that to schools for free. There's no cost associated with it. So this has saved us at Hempfeld considerable hours because I'll just tell you, I mean, we're a big district like you. We get open record requests daily. And it's like it used to be the bane of my existence of pulling all this stuff together. I also was stressed out, like, did I get did I get everything, right? Are we as a district liable because maybe I missed a record and it looks like I'm hiding that record, right? So I want out of that business, and that's really what this tool will do, is allow us to get out of that business. Let me give you another example of how I think it can be used. Let's say there is an issue in your schools and a student got hurt, right? It's not easy to ask students what's going on, right? It's very hard to uncover the truth about incidents that go on with students in schools. But students do speak across their email and their instant messaging. So, we at Hempfeld, we've had incidences where we've needed to search across our student mail domain, okay? And so this applies a Google keyword search across that mail domain for students. And so I could say, fight in the gym, right? Or whatever it might be. And then it's going to go out and it's going to look through all the instant messages, emails, and it's going to allow me as an administrator to pinpoint what's going on, any kind of emergency that I have with students. So it's a powerful tool, very, very powerful. This is used, I actually run Google State Contract in PA. We've used, it used to be called a product called Postini. And, the state of Pennsylvania used Postini for all 85,000 employees, right? It's a critical tool, and it's legally, you have to have some sort of tool in place to actually manage that, and that's what that does, a compliance tool. Make sense?
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, last one is Hangouts, as I was mentioning. That now has expanded from 15 people in a conference working on, seeing each other, talking to each other, hearing each other, working on a document together. Now expanding that out to 25 people. So that's a really, really powerful tool. Again, if you do a thing called a Hangout on Air, you can actually broadcast that. I see a lot of school districts will actually, for their school board meetings, they'll broadcast it on a Hangout on Air. On their website, they'll put the link to it. And, you'll have a lot of your citizens that have mobility issues that can't actually come into the actual meetings. They click on the link and they can actually participate, right? For your public comment sections where, someone, can address the board. You can actually open that up and hold people in a queue. So it's a really powerful tool in terms of video conferencing and presence. And again, all of these tools that I'm talking about, these are all free. These cost nothing. They'll never cost anything. This will be free forever. All of the data, the storage, everything that comes with it. So we feel that is a powerful offering for schools. Now I just want to go over some of these tools just so I can kind of explain the differences between the kind of environment you're in today, where we can go to, right? And when I look at Gmail, there's three critical things that I think are some differences, right? So obviously the first one that I see when they're pointing, sometimes email's not enough. You need to have instant messaging. One of the things that's nice about that instant messaging, especially for your ESL students, if you have a family that speaks Spanish or Russian or whatever it might be, Chinese, we have these things called chatbots now. And what these chatbots do is that you can invite them into your chat. One is a translator from Mandarin Chinese to English, and one is from English to Mandarin Chinese. So I could have a mom who's speaks Mandarin Chinese, typing in, asking a question to the teacher, and it'll in real time translate that to the teacher, and the teacher sees it in English. The teacher responds in English, and it goes back to mom in Mandarin Chinese. That translation not only works inside our instant messaging, but it's going to work inside our email. We know, Google will know that you normally speak English. So if someone sends you something in French, it'll automatically translate that, and it'll give you a button telling you it's translated, or it'll ask you if you want to translate it if it doesn't. And it's just a way to kind of break down the barriers of ESL students. So we think that's kind of cool. The second thing that I like is on the far left-hand side, you'll see that those messages are kind of layered together. So in your Outlook mail, one email has nothing to do with 5 other emails, even if it's in a thread, right? And we're all talking about this, for example, Project Everest update. Those are all individual emails. So let's say I join your project team, right? We're going for a grant for Project Everest. Chris would then have to go through and he'd have to search through his email for all the individual emails that this group has talked about to bring me up to speed, right? He might miss 3 or 4. In this case, this is what we call the conversation view. The conversation view, based on that subject, is going to start grouping all these messages together, and it's going to give context around it because it's going to do it chronologically. So, you can see there was one 59 minutes ago, one 23 minutes ago, one about 5 minutes ago, right? So I'm going to be able to kind of see the flow of discussions in a group when I join that group. It gives me context around it. So we think that's powerful. And the last one, there's a little widget on the right side. This is what we call the people widget. Relatively new feature inside Gmail. What it's going to do is it's going to kind of look at how you interact with people. Okay, so in this case, Barbara Miller, someone that I've worked with, it's going to immediately tell me, any mail that I've had with that person, so I can jump back to it really quick. It's going to look into their calendar, and it's going to say, when's the next time they're free if I want to meet them. I can actually schedule a meeting right from my Gmail interface. And any documents that we've ever shared together. Now, I use this a lot of times. I have parents call in. I don't know who their kids are. They feel like I know who their kids are, but I don't really know, right? And so first thing I'll do is I'll just go search their name inside my Gmail. And I might have had an email with that person. And then I start getting some information about them. And what that does for us is it makes us be able to kind of bridge that gap between the home and the school much quicker because, again, you're a big district, we're a big I can't know 6,000, 7,000 students. It's just not possible. But with these kind of tools, it really allows us to be more personalized in how we deal with our stakeholders, which are families and students. So those are the big differences, I would say. Aside from the conversation view and the people widget, just in the kind of modalities and the way that we speak, right? So it's email, it's instant messaging, it's being able to have a phone number to actually call phones from here, right? To be able to video conference someone from here, to have a conference call, right? You can actually use this to actually create a phone number and have multiple people call into that line, right? So this is a really powerful communication tool. So it's much more than just email. Just remember that messaging is more than email. Again, this is going to work on all your devices, your tablets, your iPhones. It really doesn't matter. As long as it is an internet-connected device, you're going to be able to get your stuff on that. All right. Now, Google Drive, just want to spend a little bit of time on that. These are the 3 things that I think are the key features of Google Drive, right? So it's about these productivity tools and storage tools, right? So it's those 2 things. It's productivity tools and storage. It's about accessing that stuff anywhere. It's about bringing those files to life. And how do I safely store those files and that data, right? So it does all of these things. And again, this is the idea of instead of storing something on one little device, right? I could lose this device. And then where's my data at then, right? I could be a special education teacher and I have IEPs on this device. I think it's very dangerous to actually store data on individual devices. I think data should be stored in the cloud. I know at Hempfeld, I don't have the budget to be able to provide the level of security Google does, right, around data. They spend billions of dollars to secure these data. And in fact, when you sign up for Google Apps, you enter into an agreement with Google that if data is lost, we no longer have the liability. That liability exists on Google, right? That's a huge thing for myself as a tech director to not have that level of liability to secure that data. I've pushed that off to a third party. So we think this is a powerful tool. This is just real quick what that looks like. It's pretty simple. There's a file system on the left-hand side. You can kind of see, what documents were shared with me. Is there anything that I've starred? Show me my recent documents, right? And then all my actual files will then be on that right window. I can click on any of those files and then I can open it up. There's one thing that says download Google Drive for PC. So if you're stuck on using a PC, because you don't want to throw the stuff that you have away, you may have a PC at home. You can actually download Google Drive client for your PC. And so, you open Word, and when you click Save As, right, you say, do I want to save it in my documents or on my desktop? One of those options is going to be Google Drive. When you select that, right, it's not only going to store a copy on your PC, but it's going to back that up, and it's going to put it in Google's cloud. right? I see a ton of people actually use this to back all their stuff up. They'll actually, download this, and they'll take all the files that are on their PC and they'll put it in that folder. And now they have a backup copy, right? How many of us has ever had a PC that's died, right? Pretty much everybody, right? You want to be able to find a way that's easy to kind of back that up and make sure you don't lose those files. It's a great way to use this. Now, I just threw up some numbers from even at Google, for business customers, getting 16 terabytes of data from us is $800 a month, right? $799.99. If you go to Box, it's typically $15 per user per month for a terabyte of data. Dropbox, I think maybe the cheaper version. So for 5 people, you can pay $795 and you'll get unlimited storage, right? So just to give you an idea, I mean, if you took $795 times however many thousands of people that are in your user population, it's a huge number, right? And that's cheaper than actually buying all these servers and managing it yourself, right? That's why these guys exist, because they've offered a cheaper way to do it. Being able to get that free storage from Google is a huge, financial win for schools, right? So I think you guys made a huge decision by being able to not only shift that liability of that data, but the cost around that. I think those cost advantages are staggering. So this is what a doc would look like, right? So forget the personal computer, right? Think of the collaborative computer. Think of being able to have a document, multiple people in it. These are all kind of lit up different colors. That's a different person. I'm seeing kind of character by character, someone working on a document. Sometimes it's not enough to actually just kind of work that way where you don't see and hear people. You can actually pull people in on a video conference around that document, work on it together, right? There's a whiteboard around here as well. So, I see a lot of, this is, some office hours for, I think it was Thursday physics chat, right? So Thursday in the evening, the teacher's able to bring kids in that, have questions. They didn't figure out what was going on in the lecture that day. And so, it's just a really nice way to kind of be able to work with folks, record these sessions. You can also see a group chat. A lot of times I'll see teachers will mute all the kids that come into the chat. They have kids talking. It's very hard to hear the teacher that way. So, there's a way to kind of mute all those kids and kind of give a lesson, right? This is an actual whiteboard. If you look over here, there's a little marker, there's letters, there's erasers, there's colors. You can actually, not only just have this whiteboard, you can have videos in there, right? So over here on the left-hand side, there's a YouTube. So, there may be a video that illustrates it better than you could actually show how to do the Pythagorean theorem or whatever it might be, right? The FOIL technique is a good example. Someone's figured out how to do the FOIL technique and illustrate that in an easy way. I would go search that on YouTube and I'd bring that video in here, and that's a nice easy way to show kids how to do this stuff. And again, this is going to work in real time on your device. So it's not just like accessing those files on the device, right? So this morning I went to Dunkin' Donuts. I came a little bit early, so I had a donut and coffee, and I thought I better look at my presentation. I didn't really spend a lot of time putting this together yesterday. And I had a couple slides in there that just had nothing to do with you guys, right? And so right from my mobile device, I was able to pull those 4 or 5 slides out, and I was off and running. So to be the idea of actually working on those mobile devices, we think that's pretty powerful. So you can do not only just actual work. A lot of things I see is I'll see kids take pictures all the time in our classrooms, right? And what they're taking pictures of is something that's on the board that their teacher might have written on the board. This has a thing called OCR, optical character recognition, and so you can actually take a picture of what your teacher wrote on the board. It'll convert that to digital text, right? Because Google can recognize those things and see words. Even when you do a search inside Google Apps, it'll search through pictures. So if I searched for, the University of Michigan, right? And there might be a picture inside my files. I was at in Ann Arbor, and I took a picture of the University of Michigan. It'll actually search that actual picture, and it'll return it as a result set. This has built-in mobile security all around it. We have clients for both of the major platforms, iOS and Android. And so it's just, I think, a usable solution from the mobile side. All right, calendar. I just want to chat real quick about this. So consider our calendar as an open slate where you can layer various people's calendars on it, right? So that's really how it works. Unlike your Outlook calendars, which is your calendar, this is the idea of, having my calendar in yellow, but I also want to see, what's going on in gym class and maybe some personal things, right? So on the very far left side, those are my calendars. I can kind of click on any one of those calendars, turn them on, and bring them onto the screen, okay? I can unclick them and just see only my calendar stuff. A little bit further, it says other calendars, add a coworker's calendar. So I might be in the math department, and I want to see everybody who's busy because maybe I want to schedule a meeting with all these folks inside my math department. Before I send it out, I'm just going to look at everyone's calendars because I know on Monday everyone's free that day. And so, it's just really nice to be able to have that level of, calendar sharing within your organization so you know where everybody is. Also, you can schedule resources on here. So, like I mentioned before, this room or the gym or the football field or whatever it might be. What we've used it for, which I think is really cool, we have some pretty forward-thinking curriculum people at Hempfeld. And, I get a new teacher that comes in. A lot of these new teachers, they don't know at what part of the year they should be teaching what, right? We used to just give them a book and, here's your curriculum map, and, right, we wipe our hands of it. And, it's kind of crazy to think about what a new teacher goes through when they come in. Everyone's so busy, in their own lives. It's really hard to kind of, how do we bring them into the culture? So one of the things that you can do is you could actually take all of your standards, and for each one of those standards, you could map those to an actual time on the calendar. And you can embed the actual content that they need to deliver to those kids on that calendar, right? So I look at this as, these are standards mappings, this is pacing guides. This is the tool for that, right? And it's not just new teachers. I mean, even your veteran teachers, I think, could benefit by being able to see, where am I at in the course of the school year? What am I teaching? And where should I be as it relates to those standards, right? It's a good gauge. It's a good metric. And also being able to just get all that content. Instead of my curriculum director emailing me stuff with suggestions, put it in my calendar, make it available. And what happens with these teachers is they will then share their calendars with all of their students, right? So the way our classroom works now is you create an assignment on November 7th, 2016, and I put some, files in there, like maybe their homework assignments or a worksheet. That's actually going on every student in that class's personal Gmail calendar, okay? So it's just a really cool way to kind of, manage that workflow. So we feel calendar is a very, very powerful tool. Make sense? Okay. Google Sites, I won't go on too much about this, but, again, you can build these really cool websites. It might be classroom sites, it might be an actual district site, but again, this is the idea of having an editor. We won't spend too much time on it today because it's not the focus of our discussion. Classroom, I'll just talk about it real quick. The idea of every class, being able to kind of have a mission control center for teachers. That's really what I see it as. I don't necessarily see it as an LMS in the sense of, it being very complicated. We're part of an initiative in the Westmoreland Intermediate Unit called the Academy, right? And the Academy was for kids that, instead of them going to cyber school, we'd put them in our intermediate unit, like online academy. But it required our teachers to actually teach that, right? And we would use a program called Moodle, which is very complex. And, we started out with a whole bunch of teachers and a whole bunch of students in that. And last year we had one kid and no teachers in that, okay? And it's because these LMSs it's like a full-time job to be able to manage these very complex LMSs. This is something that's very easy and it just works inside your Google Drive. I can push content out to a kid by clicking a button, selecting the file, putting a note on for the kid, putting a due date in, and I'm done. Right? So it's very lightweight. So, it's about creating and collecting assignments, right? It's about improving communication. So all your kids are on these social sites. They're on Instagram, they're on Twitter, they're on Facebook, right? This idea of social streaming, we can bring that social streaming into the classroom, right? So the idea of, I'm going to teach the FOIL technique today, and I'll actually make a post about it inside my classroom, and then all of the kids that are in my class can comment on that, right? They can talk to one another. If someone doesn't know how to, do the FOIL technique, well, other kid says, well, it's first, outer, inner, last, right? So, it's facilitating those social style discussions, which I think is really cool. I haven't seen many folks do it in that way. And the last one is just, being able to stay organized, how to organize your classes around, a timeline from the start of the school to the end of the school with 180 days. So one of the things Classroom has done is they now have the ability to reuse all those posts. So once you go through and you do 1 year of putting all your assignments in there, you have a database of all these assignments. So, day one of year 2, I'm going back to day 1 of year 1, and I'm grabbing that assignment and I'm posting it, right? All the work's done for you. So it's really a 1-year deal. This is what a classroom looks like in terms of, distributing something, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just title it, right? I'm going to say it's basic Italian vocabulary. I'm going to give some instructions. Please fill out the attached worksheet. This will test your knowledge of the Italian words we've been studying in class. I'll click the attach button, right? So if you look kind of right down here, there's an attach button where you can attach it directly from your actual hard drive on your PC. You can grab something from your Google Drive. You can grab something from YouTube. You may have a link that you found that's a really cool lesson that exists out there online on the web, and it's got a web address. So whatever it is that you grab here, you can actually push out to your students all in one fell swoop, right? And then, if it's a Google Drive file, you want to put the permissions in there, right? Can the students view the file? Can they edit the file? I think the best one is make an individual copy for all the kids, right? That way you preserve the actual document and it creates an individual copy. So when the students get it, it might be something that was in a Google document. There'll be a little button now that's at the top of that document that says turn it in. And so they'll actually do all their homework, and when they're ready, they click the turn it in button, and then you guys get it like this, right? So I can tell, who's kind of turned their assignments in, who hasn't, and I can grade it, right? So we can do points or percentages on a scale. And so it's a really easy way to do this. There's now the ability to, there's a download button. So whatever SIS that you guys use, you can now automatically upload that directly into your SIS. There is an API that's built around this now. So an API is an application programming interface. You could actually link directly with your SIS. So as you create an assignment inside Google Classroom, it'll create an assignment in your SIS. As you grade it in Classroom, it'll grade it in your SIS, and it streamlines that whole process. So another new feature that's coming out is this idea of called cast. Casting your whole screen, kind of like we're doing now, to everyone that's in this classroom. Really, really cool tool. So if you ever get to the point where you do go do one-on-one, and you don't necessarily want to use your whiteboard or your projectors that are up here, you just want to put it on the actual kids' devices, you can actually take over control of the students' devices in that room, and you can kind of put your lessons on here. So this would be like, a lesson that would be inside Classroom, and it gets pushed out to each one of the kids. So it might be a video, there might be some information about it, and we think that's kind of a cool feature. Again, that does not cost anything. Classroom even works on all your mobile devices. So, again, as I mentioned before, being able to, whether it's grading an assignment or actually doing the homework on your mobile device, this will all work together. It doesn't matter if you're on a PC or you're on an iPhone. We have another button called the Share to Classroom button. So, you as teachers, you might find cool resources that exist out there on the internet, right? You want to share that to all the kids in your first period English class. We have a little plug-in that goes into Chrome, and you can click that plug-in, select which class you want to post it to, and it's going to share it to all those kids in that class, right? Very, very easy to use tool. It's instead of copying and pasting and opening up some LMS, this is clicking a button on a browser and it's sharing it to all the kids in the class. You can actually share to multiple classes at the same time. So if I teach 5 sections of Algebra 1, I'm going to share it one time, I'm going to select all 5 classes, and they're all going to get that message. Okay, make sense? So how do we integrate technology in a learning environment? When you combine these apps with actual devices, hopefully you guys get down this path. When you do, you're going to get to these Chrome devices. We think they're just very easy to use because they're web-based, they're managed, they're customized from the cloud, the security's built in, you don't need antiviruses, and they're forever fresh, right? So I have, these old Chromebooks that you have, these Samsungs, they're probably four years old. Those are just as good as the brand new ones that you're buying, from Best Buy today, because they have the same exact operating system. It automatically updates. From a classroom standpoint, I know we've worked with a vendor that sold to Quaker Valley, and we supplied them with licenses for Chromebooks, and they went from having MacBooks in the room, right? That when they'd start a class up, it might have been 7-8 minutes before everyone actually was able to get on the same page. These are going to boot up in 8 seconds, ready to go from a cold start. And the other thing is, these are going to run for 10 hours for a full school day. Sarah Catholic is a small Catholic high school on the eastern side of Pittsburgh. You know, they've given Chromebooks to each one of their kids, and they just say, look, you know, make sure they're charged before you come to school. Take them home with you, and because, you know, if you think about, are you going to put plugs in all your rooms to go to one-to-one? No, you're not. So it's a very easy thing to do. So we think these devices are great, and, you know, again, it just makes it affordable. I mean, these are $149 now, right? We now have these Chromebooks bits, so, you know, if you ever need to, you know, replace some labs, these become deadly cheap. So for us, it's really about how do we make things really cheap, really easy to use. You can also manage, you know, there's mobile device management for your mobile devices that connect to your domain. You know, we can actually apply security policies across all these devices. We offer a thing called two-factor authentication, you know, so it's kind of like the banks use. You could look over my shoulder and see my username and password. You go home to your computer, you want to log in and see what's inside my email account, and it'll pop a little code and it'll say, you know, put in your 6-digit secret code. And that's where it would send a text to my cell phone. So you would have had to store on my cell phone as well to even get into my account. This makes things very, very secure. Now, again, I go back to the idea of special education. You know, I got special ed teachers that are all over the place. If they lose a PC, you know, I'm sweating about that because they got private healthcare information that exists, right, through IEPs, right, chapter 14, 15, 16. And that was just like kept me up at night. And we don't ever want to have that kind of an issue. So, you know, to be able to have these device management capabilities, you know, a special ed teacher calls me now and says, I lost my iPhone. I got some, you know, student private health information on there. So first thing I do is I'd locate it on a Google map, right? And I'd say, okay, you know, it's here. In the meantime, I'd lock that. If she can't find that device, I remotely wipe that device. So all of the liability that we had of that student's personally identifiable information, we can wipe off that device, right? And so having that level of kind of security and control around data and devices, we think is critical. So, you know, Chris and Russ, I think, made a great decision to be able to move to this kind of a platform to manage it in this way. So you asked earlier about e-discovery. This is kind of what this looks like, right? There's a search box, right? It's just like Google search. And, you know, you're going to just put search terms in there, things that you're looking for. It's going to look through your whole mail domain, and it's going to be able to then return result sets for something that you're looking for. And as I also mentioned before, being able to create accounts for, if you're subpoenaed for your district attorney, to be able, instead of, you know, being part of that discovery process, being able to step out of that process saves a ton of time and money. So we think that's a pretty valuable tool. You know, it's really about how do I keep things safe and in compliance. You know, so from ISO 27001 to SSAE 16 Type 2, all the way to, you know, HIPAA compliance. Google now signs, you know, business associate agreements where they assume the liability of any data breaches for personally identifiable healthcare information. It's a very powerful tool. You know, we have sync and sharing controls. This is full encryption. You know, that's a huge difference between coming from Outlook and Exchange. You know, you don't have, unless you buy a separate product, actual encryption with your Outlook and Exchange. You know, this is actually full encryption, end-to-end encryption, when data is at rest and when it's in transit. You know, we have full app and domain whitelisting, built-in mobile security. We do even things like suspicious login detection. You know, just earlier, I logged in from a computer that I don't normally log in from, and it automatically sent me an email message saying, hey, we have a suspicious login. You know, if it's you, verify it, right? So those just levels of security you're just not going to find anywhere else. You know, from a security standpoint, you know, a lot of folks don't know this. Google is actually the 4th largest server manufacturer in the world. They don't even sell servers. This is the level of infrastructure that these guys have built. You know, billions of dollars flowing through these systems every day, millions of credit cards. These are, you know, in terms of their servers, they're their actual own servers, hardened custom Linux stacks. They build it on their own, right? They don't communicate what that actual stack looks like. Years ago, Google built a thing called the Google File System, right? And this is, I think, the secret sauce of what really grew Google to prominence. So, you know, when I store data now, right, we got data stored on this PC. So a PC is no different than a server, right? It's a computer that stores data, has a database on it. So the way Google dealt with this is they shard data. So, You know, imagine me going and punching that glass out, right? It's going to break into little shards, little pieces of glass. Well, Google does this with emails and documents where they take the actual data that is that document and they break it into thousands of pieces. And they store this all over servers all over the world. In other words, all their eggs are not in one basket, right? It's actually on various servers, and they have technology that when you sign in with your username and password and you verify who you are, it'll then bring all that data back and assemble it in a split second, and you have it. So it's you know, about making sure that something's secure, making sure that it's going fast, and we think that they have something that is special and unique and proprietary. They also have FSMA mid certification, which allows them to deal with the federal government. So it's a big deal. So I'm going to take a break now because you know we're in for about an hour. We'll give you a real quick 5-10 minute break, and we'll jump back in. And we're going to actually get hands-on. You guys will log into your various accounts, and again, I don't want it to be kind of a one-way. I wanted to give you an overview that was a little bit one-way. I want you guys to talk to me. I want you to ask questions, and we'll master this stuff, and we'll go from there. Any questions before we break?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I obviously did not read an email that came from Mr. Stankel about the cell phone application.
Yep.
So if I go on and search by his name in the email.
Yep.
Okay, now supposing he sent it before it was installed, will it still pull it up?
It will.
Oh,
Yep, we'll find it.
sorry, Chris.
Nothing to apologize for. Why we're here.
Okay, we'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you.